Mike Wood, how you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks, Dave.
Hey, with .NET 3.5, Microsoft released Language Integrated Query, LINQ.
Yep.
.NET 4.0 has some enhancements to that, right?
Yes.
The parallel link stuff.
Parallel link.
Tell me about that.
Well, the parallel link is actually part of the task parallel library, so it's a part of a larger framework that they're embedding inside of .NET 4.0.
Okay.
And it's a whole bunch of neat things to help you deal with concurrent programming, right? Multiprocessor machines.
The entire library is?
The task parallel library,
okay.
Yes. And they have some low-level things like new reader-writer locks and spin locks and things like that to deal with much lower-level concurrent programming.
Okay.
Now, P-LINQ in itself, parallel link, is part of that, and it basically allows you to take a sequential link query and, with just a little bit of code from you, spread it across multiple processors.
Okay, and what's the advantage of doing that?
Well, the perceived advantage would be, I've got a link query, it takes quite a while to produce something. Maybe you're chugging through some mathematics, right? Something that's pretty computational heavy to produce your result, and you want to speed it up. And we've got, n number of cores on our boxes these days. So you put in some parallel link, tell it that you want to scale it up a little bit on the cores, and it will automatically for you take that query, break up the collection that it's dealing with, assign them to processors and cores, and say go for it.
So this is some syntax that I can add to my LINQ query to tell it to use a certain number of cores if I have them?
Yes, it's definitely just a little bit of syntax. It's actually implemented through extension methods because that's how LINQ itself works.
Sure.
Is extension methods off of IEnumerable.
Okay.
And P-LINQ works very similar, except it works off iParallel enumerable.
Which is derived or implements IEnumerable?
Yes. And so what you do is you have your LINQ query, you have your collection, and you say dot as parallel. So you might say for x in data. For a standard sequential link query,
right.
You would say for x in data dot as parallel. And what that's doing is it's taking the IEnumerable in and wrapping it in an instance of iParallel enumerable.
Okay, so as you're iterating through your results returned by your LINQ query, you can tell it to iterate through on several different processes at the same time.
Well, as you're iterating it, it's the execution that's actually getting parallelized, not necessarily what you're doing in the iteration.
Okay. Depending
on how you use it. There is a method, an extension method included in P-LINQ called for all, and what that allows you to do is say, I want for all the results in this query, I want to do a particular operation with them, and so it actually allows you to say, run the query, and as you're done with your small segments of the collection, go ahead and run this operation, so you can actually parallelize that operation's execution as well as the query.
Okay.
But for the majority of them, it's simply the execution of the query that's parallelized.
So I'm trying to get a handle on what's different between the P-LINQ versus the LINQ. What's different between iParallel enumerable versus IEnumerable? I know they're both difficult to say. But if I don't use these extension methods, will my query stay on one processor, or will it use both?
No, if you don't use as parallel, right, it's only going to run on the one processor, just like it would today, sequential query.
Okay,
right?
so the LINQ by itself is not designed to take advantage of multiple processors.
LINQ by itself is not. No,
okay.
that's the reason they've come up with parallel LINQ.
Got it. Okay.
And the extension methods that that are provided when you do dot as parallel and you get that instance of iParallel enumerable back, you have host or access to all sorts of new extension methods. Well, not necessarily new. They look exactly like the ones that you're familiar with LINQ. So sum, average, those kinds of things. Select, where, they're all the same.
So the syntax is the same, but the implementation is different.
Yes, the implementation under the hood allows you to handle that parallelized code.
Okay. Now, if I have 4 processors on my machine, is it reasonable for me to expect just to say add some syntax to my queries and expect a 4-fold performance increase?
That would be nice.
In my query? It'd be wonderful.
It would be nice. It'd be wonderful.
Well, that's what I'm paying for. Why am I going to get that?
Well, P-LINQ's free. It comes as part of the framework. So, no, you won't see. It's possible that you would see a marked improvement, but the problem is I can't say you will or won't because I don't know what your query is doing. If inside your query, you're doing
You're
something.
saying it depends.
It depends. It's
All
the
right.
architecture answer, right? If your code is doing a lot of things that cause the thread to have to wait, right? Whether
Mhm.
maybe within your where code, you're going off to a database or you're checking something,
Okay.
right? And it's causing the thread to wait. Then P-Link isn't going to be as efficient with that because now the thread has to wait. The OS is going to swap in and say, oh, there's context switches going on now. Because anytime the thread is put into a wait state, well, let's see what other work we can get done, right?
That's the operating system kind of doing that.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's, you don't have a lot of control over that
Right.
through P-Link. And so you are going to see a market improvement if your LINQ query is pretty much pure computational. Like it can just work with what's in there. Pure functions.
So there's no wait state basically. It's working the entire time.
Yep.
It's inside of your query.
Inside your query. If it can sit down and produce the whole result without outside knowledge, it doesn't have to go off to get any more information or those kinds of things, you'll see a much better improvement there.
Okay.
Because the thread never stops.
Okay. What if I'm familiar with LINQ and I don't know anything about P-Link? How could I get started learning this stuff?
Well, number one, there's a podcast. So you like podcasts, obviously.
I do. Yeah.
So
Especially this one.
Yeah, especially this one. So Scott Hanselman did a podcast, I believe, with Stephen Taub from Microsoft, who's on the Parallel LINQ team.
All right.
And that was last year, like June, July area.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the concepts are still exactly the same.
I mean, the syntax probably has changed since then.
Well, actually, no. The
Really?
syntax,
Okay.
they dropped a CTP last year in June.
Mm-hmm.
And I put together a P-Link talk for DevLink that year. And this week I'm giving it to user groups, which is why I'm up here in Michigan.
I saw it twice. It was awesome.
And with that, I found that I could just compile the code and run it, even with the CTP of .NET 4.0 in 2010 that came out at PDC.
Oh, your code from last June
Yep.
worked on the latest drop.
Because literally the part of the code that you're supplying in P-Link is literally adding dot as parallel.
So they started out with very simple syntax,
Yes.
which is the reason I say that is I've worked with CTPs in the past, and they tend to start out with kind of verbose syntax, and when people complain, then they meaning Microsoft, the product teams, they get it more concise as time goes on, because I think developers prefer more concise syntax.
This was, I mean, the footprint that you have access to in the API is very small. You say .as parallel, you get the IEnumerable or iParallel enumerable back, and because it implements all the same extension methods as a regular LINQ query, the syntax is already defined for them. They only had to provide a way to hook into the parallelized implementation of the execution. So the actual API didn't change much at all, if at all.
So for the LINQ part, there really wasn't a whole lot of syntax to add.
No, it's
to make it parallelized. Just a few extra keywords or extension methods, and it takes advantage of the parallel processing.
Right. So literally to test it out to see if you're going to get that fourfold increase, you can go in, time your code prior to implementing as parallel, see how long it takes, add as parallel to your query, and then measure it and see how long it takes.
Okay, so getting back to just getting started, there's a podcast by on Hanselman, so I'll link to that in the show notes, and there's a place to download it from where?
Yep. If you just go out to your favorite search engine and type in parallel task parallel library or P-Link download. P-Link comes as part of the task parallel library.
Okay.
So there's a CTP out there from last June that will work on .NET 3.5. If you have the PDC bits for Visual Studio 2010 and .NET 4.0, P-Link is now built into the framework.
Okay, now those bits are an entire virtual machine. It's not an installable.
Yeah, as far as I know right now, it's not in an installable format for your mortals like us.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that stands, but you can download the bits from last June, and to get does it come with a help file or
there is a help file
form or
well there is a help file that it comes with. There's the task parallel team, the parallel team at Microsoft have their own blog, and that's not just the guys putting out the managed code parallel stuff. That's guys working on OS and hardware level stuff as well. Then there's also a couple of articles in MSDN right around the time that Hanselman produced his podcast. There were a couple of articles on MSDN that you can find online that talk about it as well.
Okay, so it sounds like it's not there aren't tons of people blogging about it right now. You say a couple of articles, a podcast.
There are a few. I think a lot of people, it got real big right around the time that Hanselman put out his...
Created some buzz on it.
Yep, created some buzz. But like I said, it hasn't had a CTP released for it since last June that could be used outside of Visual Studio 2010.
Yeah. Are you blogging about it?
Only that I'm taking the trip to talk about it. I'm not blogging too much about it.
So if you want to learn from you've actually got to show up in user group meetings.
Well, actually, all my presentation materials are out on my website.
Okay. What's the URL?
Or the Sky, on my SkyDrive. My URL is mvwood, so Michael, V as in Vincent, wood.com, mvwood.com.
All right. Well, great. I really enjoyed the talk, and I really enjoyed talking with you today.
Right.
Mike, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thanks.